go. Excellent. Hey, everybody. I'm Nathan Smith, and I'm the Digital Programming Coordinator for the Central Arkansas Library System. Thank you so much for joining me for Basic Computing. Before we dive in, there are a couple of things that I want to make sure we tackle before we get things rolling. First of all, of course, always keep an eye on cals.org. If you head there, move your mouse over events and click on search for an event, you will find a list of all of the cool stuff we've got coming up. A lot of cool virtual events happening. On Thursday, we're having an author discussion with author Kevin Brockmeyer about his brand new book, The Ghost Variations, and a whole host of other things. So take a look and feel free to join us. We're happy to have you anytime. We've got some other cool classes coming up that you might be interested in terms of technology classes as well. Things like I offered Microsoft Word Part 1 last week, but you can find the video version of that on the CALS YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube, cals.link/YouTube, you'll get there, and you can check out Word Part 1 and then join me this week for Word Part 2. So that's always pretty useful stuff. And I definitely want to make sure that if you're interested, you are able to join me for that. Excuse me. We've also got, there's several other things. I'm a little sleepy today, y'all. I'm not going to lie. So take a look. If you go to cals.org, move your mouse over events and click on technology classes, you should find it there. Let's see, what else have we got going on? So the other big thing I always like to say at the beginning of class is if at any point you have questions, please speak up and let me know. Don't worry about whether it's a silly question. I am not going to judge you on that. You know, we're all at different levels. We all have different types of skills and different types of experience in our life. So that is not something that I'm going to judge. If you have a question, I just want to make sure it gets answered. So don't worry about any of that. You know, just make sure you are, or just make sure you ask those questions when they come up. If you're joining me in Zoom on your computer, all you need to do in order to ask those questions is to move your mouse down to the bottom of your Zoom window and click on that chat button right there. It's a little speech bubble. Click on the chat button and it should pop right up and allow you to type in your question. The other option that you have, or if you're on a mobile device, watching on a mobile device, that's fine too. If you're on a smartphone, a tablet, an iPad, whatever, you can find the chat there as well. Usually you'll need to tap in the middle of the screen and then look up at the top for a little ... button that says more on it. Tap on that and then tap chat in that menu that pops up there. So that's how you get to the chat if you're on Zoom. If you are watching on one of the other platforms like YouTube or Facebook Live, you're not left out of this either. All you need to do in order to get there is in order to ask a question, is to type it in the comments on YouTube or in the live chat the comments on Facebook or the live chat on YouTube. And I should see those as well, although there may be just a little tiny bit of delay. It shouldn't be too bad. You know, we'll tackle them. Also, don't worry about if you're interrupting me. That's not a problem for me. You know, if there's something that we need to wait on addressing, then I'll say, well, that's a good question. Hold that thought. But we will make sure that things get addressed, because the point of the class is for you to learn stuff. So if you are confused or distracted by questions in the back of your mind, you're not going to learn as much as you otherwise would. So I want to make sure that doesn't happen, and that we really make the most of our time. So ask away. Oh, the only other thing to mention before we get into the meat of this is, if there are technical difficulties, also, please let me know about that right away. If my microphone cuts out, if my video turns off, if you can't see the screen when I'm screen sharing, in all of those situations, or in any of those situations, please make sure you let me know as soon as possible in the chat or in the comments, so that way I'll know and I can fix the problem, because otherwise I might not know right away, and that might waste some of our time that we could be using to actually do class. So let me know as soon as you run into those, or if we run into those problems, and we will tackle it. All right, great. So let's dive into this. In this class, we're going to do a few different things. We're going to go a few different places. There's a lot of different stuff we could potentially cover. The basic idea behind this class, no pun intended, I guess, is this class is geared towards people who have some experience with computers, but maybe not much, like, or maybe they just know how to do the essentials in order to sort of muddle through what they're trying to do in a given moment. So maybe they've used a computer at work, or maybe maybe you've got a laptop at home, and occasionally you do Zoom on it, or you pull up a YouTube video or whatever. In those types of situations, you check your email. In those types of situations, well, it's a lot of folks know how to do those basic kinds of things, but it's also good to have some background knowledge, and also to kind of deepen your knowledge a little bit about how to use your computer. Because if that's all you're doing, sometimes you can feel like, well, I better stay over here in the shallow area, rather than moving over here to the deep end and seeing what I can do. But I'd argue that's the exact opposite of the approach that you want to have when you're dealing with technology. The way that I learned most of the things that I teach in my classes is not by taking, college classes about technology, or getting an IT degree, or any of those sorts of things, or even having someone sit down and show me. The way I learned a lot of what I learned is just by experimentation, basically. And back when I was a kid, and maybe didn't know better as much, that could have been a problem. It could have resulted in breaking our computer that we had as a family, or things like that. But nowadays, people who make technology know that the people who are, if they're good at their job at least, they know that the people who are using their technology are not technology experts. They're just regular people who want to get the things done that they need to get done. And so if they're doing everything properly, they're going to make it clear what's going on. They're going to give you clues to help you figure out how to get where you need to be, or how to do what you want to do. And the biggest thing that they're almost definitely going to do is they are going to put up major guardrails so that you don't have serious problems when you're working on your computer and trying to do something. For example, I used to see in movies or TV shows a lot, somebody would somebody would come up to a piece of fancy equipment and there'd be kind of a computer nerd there who'd shoo them away. Don't touch that. Don't touch that. And then later on, curiosity would get the best of them. They'd come along and touch it. And when they hit a button, suddenly everything on the computer was deleted. That was an exaggeration back in the 90s or so, but it's nothing approaching realistic nowadays. Nowadays, if you're about to do something that's going to cause you to lose a whole lot of information, or honestly, even a little information, or if you've started a process that might result in removing a program from your computer that you want to keep, or erasing stuff that you might need in the future, then you're going to get warnings about that. It's going to pop up. There's going to be something red on the screen, and it's going to say, are you sure you want to do this? It might result in X, Y, and Z. And if it's something that's going to erase your whole computer like that, you're going to see you're going to see like big old red flags, and I'm mostly not even being metaphorical. So I just want to encourage you, before we even get into the details of this, that it's super important. The best thing you can do to learn about technology, obviously, I believe in technology classes. I teach them, but one of the best things you can possibly do to learn about technology is to just sit down and play around with it, just experiment. And that's going to take you a long way. So we're going to talk about a few areas of interest during this class. One of the things that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk a little bit of hardware. Now, when I say hardware, that's a little bit of tech terminology, but basically really all it means when I say hardware is the physical parts of the computer, the parts that you could see and touch, the parts that would still be there even if the computer is off. So we're going to talk a little bit of hardware. Specifically, we're going to talk about the connectors on a computer and what some of the most common ones do. That'll help us to demystify that a little bit so that you can confidently plug your computer in, or if you get a new keyboard or mouse or something else, you can confidently plug that in. If you need to move your computer across the room, or if you're moving houses and you need to move your computer, you can feel like, oh, okay, I can actually do this. Then we're going to talk software a little bit. We're going to talk about a few key things that useful strategies for sort of getting around, and we're going to talk about how to make and we're going to talk about how information is organized inside of your computer, because that can be really important and useful too. All right, let's dive in. I am going to start up my screen sharing here. All right, there we have it. Okay, great. So let's talk about the connectors on a computer. So a computer has a lot of different connectors on it. You may have noticed and been a little bewildered by some of them. When I click, what I'm showing you right here is the back of one of the computers in my computer classroom, a few doors down here. When we're having in-person classes, this is where I teach. And if you come to an in-person class in the future, you will sit right on the other side of this little box from that computer. So, or from one of these computers. So you'll potentially get to see one of these in person at some point. So, but we're going to talk through the connectors on here piece by piece, and that way you'll have a better understanding of what kinds of connectors are on a computer and what they might do for you. The first connector that I want to show you is pretty straightforward. It is the power socket on your computer. So your computer's power socket obviously gives it power. Without electricity, your computer will not work. I don't think any of you will be shocked to hear me say that. If you have a desktop computer like this one, a computer that has kind of the little case and then a separate monitor or screen, if you have a desktop computer like this, then mostly your power socket is going to look like this. It's going to have a cable that has this sort of, looks like a slightly flattened version of a power socket on one end, and then it has just your standard 3-prong plug on the other end. You can plug into any old outlet. Now, I will say, and having said that, if you're plugging in a desktop computer, generally speaking, my advice would be to plug it into a surge protector. When I say surge protector and power strip, we kind of use those terms interchangeably. But a surge protector is actually a piece of equipment that will keep your computer or whatever else is plugged into it from experiencing major like sudden bursts of power. If, for example, the electrical line near you is hit by lightning or something like that. The surge protector is going to keep that from happening. It's going to protect your equipment in case of things like an electrical storm. And so I definitely encourage that. In a pinch, though, obviously, you can always connect it just straight to the wall. Or if you're not going to connect it for, a long time. If you've got, if you see one of these, you know that that's where the power comes from. If you got a laptop, your laptop is usually not going to use a power socket like this. Instead, what it's going to have is it's going to have a little brick associated with it. So it'll have a regular plug that can plug into something like this on one side, and on the other side, and then in the middle of the cable, it's going to have a big old block of some sort that the cable runs into. And then on the other side, it's going to have usually a thinner cable that plugs into the computer directly. What that is, the little block, is called an AC adapter, and it converts the power that's coming out of the wall into a type of power that the laptop can use. And then that power is fed directly in there. Your computer won't have one of those bricks on the cable, usually your desktop computer, because all of that equipment is actually inside the computer itself, the equipment that sort of converts the power the way that it should be. So that's the power socket. It's obviously pretty important. Next up, we're just going to work from left to right, are the audio jacks. The audio jacks, this is pretty straightforward too. Basically, you'll use a cable like this to plug in some sort of audio equipment. So your headphones or a set of computer speakers or any number of things, honestly. You'll plug audio equipment into these jacks here. You could have a variety in terms of the number of these jacks that you have on your computer. Kind of the most standard setup is going to be 3 jacks. One is going to be your output or your audio out. So that one you'll either plug in headphones or speakers or something else that plays audio out of it. So that way you can hear what's going on your computer. You can watch a video without disturbing people around you. And if you have a desktop computer like this with the case, it might not even have speakers built into it. So you might need the audio, you might need an audio device of some sort in order to be able to hear anything from the computer. And then this one actually combines two jacks that are very commonly found on at least on a desktop computer: the line-in jack and the microphone jack. The microphone jack, pretty obvious. You'll plug your microphone into it so that you can make a Zoom call, or you can you can hop on Skype, or you can record a little voice memo for yourself or whatever. But then you also have the line-in jack. The line-in jack is basically a place to plug in other audio equipment that's already playing audio out of it. For example, you might plug in something like a CD player, or even your phone, things like that. Something that puts out audio that you would normally plug headphones into, maybe. That's what the line-in jack does. What this does is it combines two of them. So it's a microphone and a line-in jack. And if I plugged something into this particular jack, the computer would actually pop up and ask me, "What'd you plug in?" And then I could tell it, like, "Oh, it's a microphone," or "It's a line-in, some audio equipment." And so that's what those are. On some computers, such as my laptop over here, there's only one audio jack altogether, and it can be any of these things, or almost all of them. Sometimes you've got a little headset, something like this, that has both the microphone right here and the headphones in it. And you could plug that in, and you would just need to tell the computer, "I plugged in a headset with a microphone." Or you can, or you could just plug in a standalone microphone, or just a set of speakers, or just a pair of headphones, or whatever. So that's the audio jacks. Those do exactly what they sound like. But now you know the difference. One of the things you can look for to cue you on what audio jack you're about to plug something into, in case you're not sure, is you can look at the icons here. So this one is audio out. So you'll see, like, there are these little sound waves, and then there's an arrow coming out from the middle of them. This one is line in, because you'll see you've got the little sound waves, and then there's an arrow coming in, and you can see that same icon right over here next to the actual input. And this, it's similar, but it's not quite the same. This one is going through the little things instead of up in the middle, whatever. Of course, this would something like this would indicate a microphone jack, and something like this would indicate one of those multi-function jacks, like I mentioned, I have on my laptop. Okay, the next one to look at is the Ethernet port. The Ethernet port is, well, you can think of it as the internet port for the most part. What the Ethernet port does is it accommodates a cable like this, an Ethernet cable. It kind of looks like, if you have a landline phone in your home, or if you used to back in the day, it kind of looks similar to those telephone cables that you plug into the wall, but it's a little bit wider and has a few more little gold connectors down there. The Ethernet port, to be a little more technical, an Ethernet port is designed to connect your computer to a computer network. And so if you have an Ethernet port connecting your computer to a piece of, like, a little device inside your house, you can also plug other computers into that same device, and then your computer and the other computers can talk to each other. That is called a local area network, or you'll see it sometimes, LAN, L-A-N. But usually what's happening is that local area network, or LAN, even if it's just one computer, is also connected to the larger computer network that we're all familiar with, the internet. Hey, here we are. And so usually plugging this cable into your computer and plugging the other end into some piece of hardware is going to give you internet access. This is really helpful. Obviously, if your computer doesn't have the capability of Wi-Fi, you can plug in Ethernet instead. An Ethernet connection is also a little bit more reliable than Wi-Fi. So if you're using Wi-Fi on your computer, if you're using Wi-Fi but you find you're having trouble keeping a connection, or that things are going a little more slowly than you expect, or it's disconnecting and reconnecting, you might think about connecting your computer with an Ethernet port, with an Ethernet cable instead, because Ethernet cables don't have the same problems with interference that Wi-Fi does. Kind of like if you were trying to tune a radio, if you're inside a building with a bunch of metal walls, you're not going to get as good a signal as you are if you're outside on a clear day. Wi-Fi relies on essentially, it's fancier, but it ultimately, at the end of the day, it relies on that same technology. It's radio waves. And so if you have a hard cable connecting your computer to the source of internet, you are going to, in general, get a much higher quality connection. All right, next up, we've got USB ports. USB ports are one of the most important things I'm going to show you here. USB stands for Universal Serial Bus. Now that I've said that, you can delete it from your brain. No one will ever say that phrase to you again for the rest of your life. But that's what USB stands for. The U, in my opinion, is the important bit. Universal, because you can plug darn near anything into a USB port. Things that are on my desk that I can plug into a USB port, just on my desk, include my flash drive, my phone, the light right there that's lighting my face so that you can see me well, the camera that you're looking at me through right now, the microphone that's here in front of my face, let's see, what else? I have a little game controller over here. I've got, there's an iPad, the mouse and keyboard on my computer, just so much stuff. Any of that stuff can be plugged in via USB, just depending on what kind of equipment you have. So USB is really useful. It provides power, which is one of the ways that we use it most frequently, actually. Your phone is plugged in via a USB cord to a little charger. The charger doesn't allow you to send any information back and forth between your phone and anything else, but it does charge using a USB cable. But USB also sends data back and forth between your computer and whatever pieces of USB equipment are attached to it. With my microphone here, there's a USB cable plugged into the bottom of it that runs down here and it goes into my computer. And that's how your voice is getting to me, and also how I'm hearing the sound from my computer if it makes a noise. Because my headphones are also plugged into it. Of course, with things like flash drives or external hard drives, you can store computer files on there, and that's really helpful sometimes, so that you can have easy access to files that you use regularly. There are a couple of different kinds of USB represented here, and there's one other one that I want to show you as well here in a moment. So if you look at these a little more closely, we've got two in the middle that are blue on the inside, and 4 that are black on the inside there. The blue ones, you'll notice, also have this SS and a little branch thing here. Goofily, the SS here stands for super speed. And what these actually are, what you'll usually hear them called by people who who are tech savvy, is USB 3 or USB 3.0 ports. USB 3 ports allow you to send and receive a lot of information, allow your devices to send and receive a lot of information back and forth very, very quickly. And so for things like a flash drive or an external hard drive or a camera, things like that, where you need to send, where the device is going to be sending your computer a lot of information, you will want to, you'll want to try and use one of these ports if you can. They won't always be blue on the inside, although it's really handy when they're color coded like that. But they'll almost always have this little SS icon next to them so that you can tell which ones are which. Next to this, we have the same little branch icon, this thing down here, which is just the icon for USB. And then there's also a plus here. The plus tells me that that these ports can provide a good amount of power for devices that need it. So some USB ports will only provide basically the bare minimum of power, but these devices will do more, or these ports will do more if your device needs it. If I have something that's just a very basic piece of equipment, something like a mouse or a keyboard, I'll probably plug it in here. If it's something more like a camera or something that has information stored on it, like a flash drive or a hard drive, I'll try to plug those in to these 3.0 super speed ports. The plugs that you use, or the plugs that you actually plug into the USB ports here usually look something like this. Let me pull up the other thing that I wanted to show you here. Okay, cool. Oh, I got to change my screen sharing. Okay, so the other thing that I want to show you is USB-C. This is a newer thing. I haven't updated my, well, newer-ish. I haven't updated my slideshow just yet. So I want to show you what it looks like here. So this is USB-C or USB Type-C. Excuse me. What it is it works very similarly. It is a USB port or USB plug, just like these down here, but it's kind of rounded and it's smaller. But it actually allows you to send a lot more information through than just a standard USB port, and it provides a lot more power in some situations. A lot of Android phones nowadays use these USB-C cables rather than the cables that they used to use to charge, and they come on a lot of devices, particularly laptops nowadays, because they can do a lot of things. You can get a hub like this, for example, that you plug the USB-C cable into the computer, you plug this end into the hub, and then from there you can plug in, let's see, another USB-C. This one probably provides power, an HDMI cable, which we'll talk about in a minute, Ethernet, like we talked about earlier, a few more regular USB devices, and even an SD card, so that from your camera, things like that. So you could plug all of that in with essentially just one cable coming out of your computer, and that's pretty cool. Some laptops even use USB-C for charging, so they don't have a separate charging. They don't have a separate charging port. They just plug. You just plug a USB-C cable into one end and a little charger into the other end, kind of like you would with a phone. And that's kind of what the port looks like on the computer itself, like this, kind of pill shaped, I guess. So, so that's USB-C. If you see that, just know that it's basically it's almost the exact same thing as these USB ports over here, except just a little fancier. All right, so let's talk about monitor ports. This will be the last stop on the connector train today. Monitor ports are super important because obviously you need to be able to see what's going on with your computer in order to interact with it. And sometimes the way we interact with it is by watching a video on it or reading a document on the screen or whatever. You wouldn't get very far in most computer situations without being able to see, without being able to see an image that it puts on a screen. And so particularly for desktop computers like this, the monitor ports are obviously very important. We have 2 monitor ports on the back of this one. It actually leaves off the most common one, which we'll talk about in just a second. So the 2 ports that we have are the VGA port over here. The VGA port has been with us for a long time, probably 20 years or more, I'd say, maybe going on 30. And it is, it is extremely common. It's been the monitor port standard for many, many years. You take a cable that looks something like this, you plug it in, and you actually take these little screw posts and screw it in to the back. So that way it'll stay put and you won't be in danger of wiggling the cable out of the way. Part of that is because these cables tend to be pretty heavy. And so it'd be easy for them to sort of fall out over time, or if you move your computer around every so often to kind of get disconnected either partially or entirely that way. So, so that's the VGA port. It's on the back of this computer in the picture, which we probably got about 5-6 years ago, maybe. It's still on there despite being such an old connector because it's found in so many places. Most, if you go into a meeting room or, somewhere like that, most projectors that you find in there and even TVs will probably have one of these VGA ports on the back. Most older computer monitors, have the VGA ports on the back as well. And so it's really useful as far as compatibility goes. However, VGA has been replaced in a lot of situations by a couple of new connectors. One of those is on the back here, and that is the DisplayPort connector. So VGA uses what we call analog technology. I won't get too deep into it, but basically, if you think about, again, things like radio waves or a TV signal, it is basically kind of a wave pattern. And depending on how big the waves are and how far apart they are from each other, that gives you different, results on the other end. That's how this port transmits picture information to your monitor. It uses kind of waves of electrical energy. But that's a little imprecise. And so, and it kind of makes things a little less clear and detailed than they could be. The DisplayPort connector, on the other hand, rather than being analog, using those waves, is digital. What it does is it actually transmits the signal in a series of sort of on and off patterns. Actually, if you've ever in a movie seen computer code represented by ones and zeros, that's actually exactly what we're talking about. The ones and zeros are called binary. That's your computer's native language, because your computer thinks that 1 is the same as true is the same as on, and your computer thinks that 0 is the same as false, is the same as off. And so that's how this port communicates with your monitor. Because it's sending a digital signal, because of the way that works, it's easier to make sure that it's basically your monitor can check for errors and ask, and if your computer, and if part of the signal that it got is wrong, it can say, hey, send that part to me again. And so you can get, that gives you a clearer and more accurate picture. And it can just send information a lot faster. So you can get a lot more detail on the screen. You can get a wider range of colors, and those colors will be, those colors and those details will be more accurate than they would be with the analog. One additional really useful thing that this does is, in addition to picture, it also transmits sound. So if you want to send a signal including a picture and audio information to, say, a TV or a monitor with speakers built into it, or a monitor that has a headphone jack attached to it, then you only need one cable rather than plugging your monitor into this and then plugging your speakers or your headphones or whatever into the audio jacks over here. So that's really handy, cuts down on clutter, and allows you to get better picture and sound while you're at it too. So that's DisplayPort. A similar type of technology, or a similar type of connector that's not on the back of these computers, is HDMI. If you look here in the middle, this is what the HDMI cable looks like. It's very similar to the DisplayPort cable, except with the DisplayPort cable, you've got a rectangle, but with one corner cut out. The HDMI is it's like it's got two corners cut out essentially. And it's a little more complicated shape than that, but that's basically right. So HDMI was really designed for things like home theater. So watching a movie on your TV at home, or playing video games at home or whatever, rather than for computer stuff. But it's so convenient, and it's so widespread. Everybody's TV has HDMI at this point, unless you have a about it almost 20-year-old TV right at this point. Almost everybody's TV has it. Most projectors and and other things like that have it. And so HDMI, you'll find it on a lot of things, particularly laptops. It's really, really useful. And similarly, it'll give you a very crisp, detailed, color accurate picture, and it transmits sound as well. So those are our connectors on the computer. Obviously, there are other kinds of connectors that you might run into, but those are sort of the main types. And now that you've seen them, hopefully it'll be a lot easier to kind of to jump in and plug things in or unplug them as you need when you want to on your computer. Before we move on to something else, are there any questions about that? All right, wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. If you do think of other questions here later on, I am happy to address those. I'll certainly circle back if we want or need to. So if you haven't if you had a question but you haven't quite gotten it typed yet, no worries. Just keep going, and we'll tackle that when it's time. All right, so let's move on to the next bit here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm going to turn on the screen sharing on the other computer over here. So you can see what's going on there. All right, excellent. So what we're going to do is we are going to do a few different, we're going to try a few different things to get, well, we're going to try a few things to talk about how we get around on a, on our computer. Give me just one moment, y'all. I'll be right back. Let's see. All right, thanks for hanging on. So we're going to talk about a few different aspects of getting around on the computer and kind of, hopefully we'll be able to, well, you'll learn some really useful things here. The first thing I want to show you is something that a lot of times folks want to know because they've heard it talked about, but they haven't experienced it themselves. And I want to make sure that that we tackle this. So to make this happen, I've got the example files that I had the address for on the screen at the beginning of class. Let me throw that back into the chat here. So that way, if you want to download it later and follow along, you can. This is broadcasting on YouTube and Facebook. So on the CALS YouTube channel, you should be able to circle back if you want to try and practice this stuff, but just watch, excuse me, the first time. Let's see. All right. Cool. All right, I put that in the chat so that way you can follow that link if you want to. You will need to, once you get the file, you'll need to open it up and extract it. I put mine on the desktop, and that'll allow you to follow along like this. All right, here we go. So, so let's talk about copy and paste. What I'm going to do is I've got the file open here in front of me. I'm going to double click this file called govdocsstyleguide.docx. Back when I first started working here at the library, my job was to handle the library's government documents collection. And we were offering them to various other libraries who might be interested because we were getting rid of most of that collection. And so this was a guide that I wrote to help people add, to help the folks that I was working with add the document information to the little database that I created. I'm going to click enable editing here so that we can do the example. And now I've got this now I've got this document open and ready to go. And then I'm going to go ahead and open up something else. Well, actually, I don't guess we need to do that. Okay, let's say that I've got this first paragraph and I want to put it at the end of my document. I'm going to move it there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use cut and paste to do that. So I'm going to click here next to that paragraph and hold down with the mouse button. And while I'm holding down, I'm going to move the mouse pointer so that I get all of it shaded in gray like this. This is selected text, is what we say. Now that it's been selected, I need to, since I'm going to move it, I'm going to use the cut option. And I do have that up here at the top. So if I click this cut button up here at the top, that will remove this. But personally, I like to use the keyboard shortcut for that instead. When I say keyboard shortcut, what I'm talking about is is pressing a couple of keys on the keyboard to use some option rather than having to look for it and click it on screen. The keyboard shortcut, not just in Word, but in almost any program in all of Windows for cut is Control X. So I'm going to hold the Control key, CTRL, at the bottom left of my keyboard. And while I'm holding Control, I'm going to press the X key, X as in X-ray. And that is going to remove this. It looks like I deleted it from my document, but what I actually did was cut it out in a way. So I'm going to go down here to the bottom. And I'll press enter to just get myself a separate line there. And then I'm going to paste it in. Now, again, up here at the top, I've got this little clipboard with a sheet of paper next to it. That's the paste button. And if I click that, it'll put the paragraph here. But I like to use the keyboard shortcut for this as well. Again, I hold Control, CTRL, at the bottom left of my keyboard. And while I'm holding Control, I press V as in Victor. Sure enough, there's the paragraph. So I have cut it from the top. It's no longer at the top of my screen. And then I pasted it, or at the top of the document, I should say, and then I pasted it down at the bottom, which is all exactly what it sounds like. If you took say a newspaper, that's very irritating. If you took, say, a newspaper and there was an article that you were interested in putting in a scrapbook or, pinning up on a bulletin board somewhere, then you would take some scissors and you would cut it out. So it's no longer in the paper and now it's in your hand or on the table. And then if you wanted to put it in a scrapbook or something, then you'd take some glue and you would paste it in to the scrap paper or to the scrapbook. So now it's no longer on the scrapbook, or it's no longer in the paper, it's in the scrapbook instead. So that's cut and paste. Copy and paste is a similar operation, but just slightly different. So again, I'm going to come down here. I found that same paragraph at the bottom. I'm going to come down here, hold down with my mouse, but on my mouse button next to this, and move over and up until I get the whole paragraph selected, highlighted here. Then I'm going to copy. So again, we have copy up here at the top. I can click on that to copy it, but I can also use the keyboard shortcut, which is the way I usually do it. I'll hold Control while pressing C as in cat, as in copy, obviously. So hold Control while pressing C. Nothing seems to happen on the screen, but it has been copied. I'm going to go up to the top here, click where it was before, and again, press Control V as in Victor to paste it there. And it's not exactly where I wanted it to be. I'll make a little space here. If I want more copies of this, I can totally do that as well. Press Control V again, there it is. Again, there it is. Control V again, there it is, etc. And down here, you'll notice it's also still where I left it, right there. So that's copy and paste. And you can do that not only in one individual document, but between documents as well, or between whole other programs. You could write an email in Word and then you could paste it into your email, or you could take an image and copy it from somewhere and paste it somewhere else. All of that stuff works. So when we say copy and paste, that's what we mean. If you're ever wondering about that, that's what it is. And you can do that with text. And you'll also, as we can see, or as we'll see in a few minutes, you can do it with other things such as files. So I'm going to go ahead and click the X here to get out of this for the moment. I'll click Don't Save so that it goes back to the way it was. And now I'm back here. I'm actually going to close this little window just briefly. We're going to get back into it in a moment, though. Okay, so let's spend the next little while talking about the way that information is stored in a computer. So your computer is going to have at least one or possibly more permanent storage places for stuff. A metaphor that I like to use is well, with people, with our memories. We have short-term memory and a long-term memory, right? So if you think back, you might remember your second grade teacher, or you might remember, the first time you met your future spouse, or you might remember graduating from high school, or any number of things that happened to you in the past. The best gift you ever received. All of those things are things that are stored in our long-term memory as people. So if you think about your life, those are things that might come up. But if, say, a month ago, you looked up a phone number and you called a store to ask about some item that they might have in stock, and then you hung up the phone, you probably don't remember that phone number anymore, even though you had to remember it just briefly, because you looked it up and then you entered the phone number into your phone as you dialed. Once it was dialed, though, your brain was like, I don't need this anymore, and it gets rid of it pretty much right away. Your computer works in a similar way. Your computer has short-term memory, so you remember the phone number and then you forget it, in the form of what we call RAM, random access memory, which basically means, which basically is a little storage space that your computer can look into, keep track of what it's doing right now, what programs you have open, the clipboard, what you last copied and pasted, those sorts of things. And the video that you're watching, all sorts of whatever's going on with your computer at the moment, the RAM keeps that handy so that the computer can quickly access it and figure out what it needs to do. Then you have what's called the hard drive. Sometimes now we use a different type of thing. Technically, it's called a SSD, or solid state drive, but that's not really all that important. What we mostly call the hard drive of your computer is a magnetic disk that your computer basically writes down information that it needs to remember on the hard drive, and then grabs it, and then goes back to look for it when it needs it. And usually it knows where to look for it, which we'll talk about shortly. So your computer has short-term memory and long-term memory like that. What we do, so whenever we store something on our computer, we have to make sure we save it. It goes in that long-term memory on that hard drive. And so once we save it, it goes there, and then it's stored in a specific sort of filing system that your computer has, so that it can find the things that it needs when it needs them. So I'm going to show you how that filing system works a little bit. What I'm going to do is come down here and click on this little folder. I'm using Windows 10, by the way. If you have an Apple computer, this works somewhat differently, although the equivalent of this on a Mac, an Apple computer, is the Finder. But I'm going to click on this little folder, and it opens up what Windows calls the File Explorer. Excuse me. And the File Explorer is a way that you can, oh my goodness, excuse me. The File Explorer is a way that you can see all the stuff that's stored on your computer and browse it. What I'm going to do is, so when you first open it up, it's going to give you this view called Quick Access, which I'll mention only because it's pretty helpful. Up here at the top, it says Frequent Folders. And basically, these will be folders with information that you've used recently, or folders that you've looked at the contents of recently. And so if there are folders that you use a lot, they'll probably show up here. And so that's kind of handy if you want to get back to a folder that you've needed, that you've been working with recently. And then recent files. Oh my goodness, excuse me. Down here, you will probably see up to 20 files that you've opened recently, and you can get right back to them, and you can see where they're stored as well. Now, when I say a file on a computer, let's back up and talk about what that is exactly. Some people have an intuitive understanding of it, or they've kind of heard it enough that it sort of sinks in. But I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So when we say a file on a computer, what we're talking about is essentially just a blob of information. And so any number of things could potentially be a file. There are files that store, say, a song. There are files that are a video. There are files that are a picture. There are files that are a document, like the one that I showed you earlier. There are files that are just basically information that your computer needs in order to work properly. There are files that are sort of a 3D object, or any number of things. Almost anything that could be anything that's ultimately just information can be a file on your computer. So, and we'll talk about several different types of files as we move forward. But if you've been working recently with a file and you're like, I don't remember where I put that, you can usually find it here in this recent files list, and that's pretty handy. And you can just double click on it. If I wanted to open this Word document, for example, I would just double click on it and it'll open right up in Microsoft Word. Okay, from here though, I'm going to actually look on the left-hand side in this little navigation area, and I'm going to click where it says This PC. This PC is going to show me some specific folders here, not frequent folders or recent ones, but just folders in general that are on this computer that collect specific information. Like, for example, the downloads. This is information that you've made a copy of from online, music, pictures, documents, videos, etc. And the desktop, which we'll talk about shortly. There's also this 3D objects folder, but that's going away no one uses that, so thank goodness. And you don't have to worry about it. Down here where it says devices and drives, what it's showing me is, where it says here, Windows SSD. This is basically the hard drive of my computer. This is the long-term memory of this computer. If I plug in a flash drive, then that's also going to show up there, just like so. So there it is. It says ESD USB. That's my flash drive that I plugged in there. And yours might have other things. You could have multiple hard drives or other storage devices. You could have a CD or a DVD drive connected to your computer. That's another thing that would show up here. But a drive is just a storage space for information that your computer uses. I'm going to double click on this C drive right here. So that's going to be normally the sort of basic storage on your computer that's permanent is going to be traditionally marked with this. It'll say C:. That refers to the hard drive or the main storage of your computer. And we'll call it sometimes the C drive. When I double click on that, it's going to show me a list of some folders up here and a few files. These folders contain other folders, and they also contain files on my computer. And these three little things down here are just text files that tell me, that give me information if I want to look it up. So I'm on the hard drive, and now I've got this list of folders. Inside, or in this list of folders, I'm going to double click on users. There we go. And I have 3 users listed. KABAR, that happens to be that's the username that it picked out for me. It's weird, but I'm going to double click on that. And then this is going to show me basically the information. This is going to show me the information that belongs to me when I'm logged into this computer. Excuse me. So again, I've got things like the documents, favorites, the documents, the music, the pictures, the videos, etc. I've also got a few more. I've got a folder for contacts, so I can keep contact information in there if I want to. I've got I have that downloads folder for information I've copied from online. Favorites, I can keep the addresses of web pages that I want to be able to circle back and visit in there if I want to, and a whole bunch of other stuff. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to double click on desktop. And when I do that, you'll notice it's not one-to-one, but the things that are over here that are considered to be part of the desktop, all of them are over here as well in this area with the picture. The desktop is this area right here where you've got the picture and you've got these little icons on top of it. The desktop is meant to be kind of your starting area. The home screen is on a phone is a similar type of thing. It's meant to be sort of your starting area so that you can keep a few things there that you really need quick access to. And that way you can jump right into to whatever you're going to be working on. If I were to remove something from this, say this little shortcut to Zoom, we'll talk about that in a sec. But we've got all that here. And then I've got this folder, Basic Computing. If I double click on that, or if I double clicked over here on the Basic Computing, then we've got these example files that we're going to be working with for the last few minutes of the class. So let's talk about where we've been, and let's use one more metaphor to kind of talk about exactly where we are. You'll notice up here at the top, I have a little progression. This PC, an arrow, then Windows-SSD, C:, arrow, users, arrow, Kabar, arrow, desktop, arrow, basic computing. So all of these, this is where we've been. You might think of this in a way as the address of this folder. So the folder that I'm looking in right now is the basic computing folder. Inside of that, or that folder is on the computer's desktop, or inside the desktop folder, you might say, which is inside of the KABAR folder, which is inside of the users folder, which is inside of which is on the Windows SSD hard drive, which is in this computer. So you can think of it like an address. You know, I live in my house, on my street, in my neighborhood, in Little Rock, in Arkansas, in the United States. So, excuse me, it's the same sort of address or path, as we say, to find a particular file that's stored on your computer. If I want to get back to any one of these folders, for example, the users folder, I can click on where it shows up at the top there, and that takes me right back to that users folder. If I hit the left arrow over here, that's a back button, just like you use in your web browser to go back to the page you were just looking at. So I could click that to go back to basic computing. If I wanted to go up to the desktop here, though, I also have the option of hitting this up arrow right here. It says up to desktop. Desktop is what we call the parent folder of basic computing in this case. In other words, it's the folder that the basic computing folder is inside of. So when we talk about the parent is the container of the object that we're talking about. So in this case, basic compute, or the desktop is the parent of basic computing, and then my user folder is the parent of the desktop, and then the users folder is the parent of my user folder, and so on and so forth. So that's how our documents are arranged. I'm going to hit this back button a few times so that we get back here to the basic computing folder. Okay, inside of this basic computing folder, we have a few different files. And I want to just kind of touch on what each one is so that you can sort of see what kinds of things can be a file, and also you can become familiar with certain basic file types, which is pretty handy. So the first one I'm going to show you is this one, Adele_25_hello_1.mp3. Each of these files, you'll notice in the name, has .mp3, .jpg, .docx, .pdf, .xlsx, .pptx. All of these are what we call file extensions or file name extensions. And what they do is they give you they tell your computer, and you, if you happen to know what the extension represents, what kind of information is inside of this file. A similar thing to think about would be something like the cover of a book. If you look at the cover of a book, if you were to hand me a book that's written in Portuguese, I might be able to identify that it's in Portuguese or in some Romance language, perhaps. But I wouldn't be able to read the information that's inside the book, other than just sounding out the words, basically. I wouldn't know what it meant. And in a similar way, if you give a program that's meant for, say, dealing with writing text, for example, if you take Microsoft Word and you give it something like a song, then it's not gonna work. Word is just gonna say, well, what do you want me to do with this? This file type is not supported, is probably something like what it'll say. And so files can contain a number of different types of things, but it has to, but you have to have a program that's able to open it up and read it. So in this case, the fact that it ends in .mp3, because I know, tells me that this is audio information in this file. Specifically, if I double click on it, it opens up in Windows Groove Music. And then it starts playing the song Hello by Adele from the album 25, which is track number 1. That's why the file was named that way. So it's starting to play it. I can't hear it either, but that's for the best. So it'll play the song, and then and I can listen to it. This Groove Music is a music player program, so it makes sense that it would open it up there. Of course, there are a lot of other music player programs that are out there, but that's one that that's the one that came with my computer, essentially. You can always install a different one if there's one that you want or like better, like iTunes or something like that. So by just looking at this, because I happen to know, I can tell, oh, this is audio of some sort. And in this case, it's a song. This one, dogs.jpg, the .jpg tells me this is that this is an image of some sort. You might also see it sometimes spelled as JPEG. You pronounce both of them JPEG, and they're the same type of information inside. If I double click on it, then you'll see it's a picture of 2 dogs. Hey, all right. And depending on what view you're using, you might even, if you click with the right mouse button here in the middle, like in this blank area, you can even go view and click large icons, and then you can see some previews. So you can see the cover art from the album over here. You can see the picture of the dogs. You can see, you can see some kind of more colorful stuff. Oh, and a preview image of this slideshow that we'll talk about a little later. Okay, so that's, so if you see a file whose name ends in .jpg or .jpeg, you'll know that's a picture. And it could be any sort of picture. It could be a photo, but it could also be a drawing that somebody made, or whatever. Doesn't matter. Just something that is a picture of some sort. If I double click govdocs styleguide.docx, we've already looked at this one a little bit. That's a Word file, Microsoft Word. Any document whose name ends in .docx, it's a Microsoft Word file. So I can open that up, I can look through, and I can see, I can read the document, I can make changes to it if I want to. Microsoft Word, hoopla.pdf. If I double click on this, excuse me, it's actually going to ask me what program I want to use to open this. For now, I don't have anything better installed. So Microsoft Edge right here, which it already has highlighted for me, is fine. If I wanted to use a different program, I could click down here where it says more apps, and I could see a list of other programs installed on my computer that might be able to open this type of file. And I can even set a default. So if I click here on this little check mark, it says always use this app to open .pdf files. And what that would do is, in the future, if I double clicked on this, it would just open right up in whatever I chose up here, rather than asking me what program I want to use to access the information there. In this case, I'm not going to do that though. I'm just going to click OK. And now it opens this up. Hoopla is a digital service that we used to offer at the library. And this was a handout that we made to show people the basics of how to use it. So PDF files, PDF stands for Portable Document Format. And basically what that is all of these images, the little arrows here, the text, all of this stuff is stored inside of the document itself. If you look at, well, I'll show you. I'm going to exit this. so GovDoc style guide, when you look at it, if I move my mouse over it, it says size 258 KB or kilobytes. If I move over here, this file is 4.04 megabytes. A kilobyte, not that you have to remember this, but a kilobyte is 1,024 megabytes. So this file is what, probably 10 times the, a little more than 10 times the size of this one in terms of how much of your storage space it takes up. But if I wrote a document like this in Microsoft Word, it's probably not going to look the same on other devices because of the way that a Microsoft Word file works. So a Word file is smaller, but you don't have as much control over the end product that the person on the other end receives when they open it up. So that's why these PDF files are super duper common. You'll find them all over the internet. If you, for example, if you decide to print your tax forms this year from your computer, the file that you'll get is a PDF so that the forms look exactly right. They have the right spacing and everything. And so your tax form will be exactly like my tax form. So PDF, portable document format, you'll see these a lot. Another common type of file that you'll see from time to time is this XLSX, and that is a Microsoft Excel workbook. If I double click on that, it'll open up. So Excel is a spreadsheet program. It's designed basically for listing things out and sometimes doing math or accounting of some sort. In this case, I used it in my old government document job to keep track of the items that we were offering to people, to other libraries, and figure out where to send them. And also I used it to track which items we were discarding so that because nobody wanted them, basically. So I could write a list. I could sort the list by various categories. So I could sort it by title, the year it was published, or the classification number. If you're doing, if you're working with numbers, you can, you can do all sorts of different mathematical operations, and it's really, really handy. I have an Excel course that I offer pretty regularly. So if you're interested, or certainly if you're looking for a job or things like that, highly recommend that. Excel is a really in-demand skill, and it's a program that can be a little intimidating sometimes to folks when they first, if they just open it up on a whim, or if they're like, or if someone tells them you should really learn to use Excel. But once you know a little bit about it, it really opens up, and it is such a useful tool. So I definitely recommend that to you. I'll close this out. And finally, staff training digital services.pptx. This slideshow here, a colleague and I used to help train other library staff members on how to use the digital services and how to help other people use the digital services that we offer here at the library. By the way, if you aren't taking advantage of those, you can download audiobooks and ebooks and digital magazines and music for free with your library card. So definitely head to cals.org and check that out. And join me for your digital library, ebooks and audiobooks, towards the end of the month. I want to say on the 29th. Yeah, you can join me for that class, and I'll show you. This is a PowerPoint presentation, very similar to the one that I showed you at the beginning of class with all the different computer connectors. PowerPoint is a program that allows you to create those sort of digital slideshows, so you can add a visual component to something that would otherwise just be you talking, and that's pretty handy. So if you find a file whose name ends in .pptx, that's going to be a PowerPoint. That's going to be a PowerPoint presentation. One last thing I'll show you is how to shift this stuff around a little bit. Let's say I want this picture of the dogs over here in this test folder. To do that, all I need to do is click on it to select it. You'll notice it's kind of highlighted with this blue here. I'll hold down on my mouse button, and while I'm holding it down, I'll move the mouse, and then I'll let go when it's over the folder called test. You'll notice it has an arrow and says move to test. When I let go, it's gone from there, but when I double click it in the test folder, there it is. If I want to move it back, that's a little bit harder to do. One of the ways, well, it so happens over here on the left, the basic computing folder shows up there. I could take it and I could drag it over. You'll notice it says move to basic computing. If I let go now, then it'll show up there. Another thing that I could do would be to cut and paste. So I can either click with the right mouse button on this and click cut, or I can press Control X on my keyboard like I did before. I'll click back to the basic computing folder, and then I can paste. I can either right click and click paste, or I can press Control V to paste it in. Beautiful. And when I double click here, you'll notice it's no longer in that test folder. So let's talk about, or if I want a copy of it in this test folder, I can also do that. One way is to, again, right click and click copy, or press Control C to copy. And then I'll double click in the test folder, right click in the blank area and click paste, or just press Control V. And there it is. But let's say I don't want to keep this copy, because now I have two pictures of the dogs. One is here in the basic computing folder, and then one is here in the test folder. Let's say I want to get rid of the one that's in the test folder. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete it. If I right click on it and click delete, that works right here. Another option that I have is to click on it and then press the delete key on my keyboard. That works too. Excuse me. When I do that, it says this folder is empty. But one of the weird things about your computer is that your computer doesn't really delete things permanently. Well, it does, but it takes some doing. I'll show you what I mean. So over here on the desktop, I have this thing called the recycle bin. If I double click on that, it opens up in another window here of the File Explorer. And you'll notice I have some things in here, including dogs.jpg. Now what it's done is it's gotten it out of the way. So it's out of the folder that it was in before, and it's compressed it a little bit so that it takes up less space on my computer. That's good, but I really don't need it. So what I can do if I want to get rid of it for permanently is I can click, I can select it down here, right click and click delete and delete it from there. Or I can go up here where it says manage recycle bin tools, and I can click empty recycle bin. And that's going to get rid of all of this stuff permanently. If I deleted something and I didn't intend to, that's what the recycle bin here is for. I'll right click on it and click restore. And then it goes back to the test folder where it was before. Finally, if I want to permanently delete it and I don't want it to go to the recycle bin, I want it to take up no space on my computer whatsoever, I can totally do that as well. So all I need to do is either right click and then hold Shift on my keyboard while clicking delete, or I can hold Shift on my keyboard and press delete on the keyboard. It says, are you sure you want to permanently delete this file? I say yes, and then it's gone. Now there's still the other copy back up in the basic computing folder, but the copy that was in the test folder is gone. And that's about it. What questions do y'all have for me before we wrap it up for today? All right. I don't see anything at the moment, and but if you do have questions later on, feel free to let me know. You can email me digital@cals.org. So that's digital@cals.org. And I would be happy to communicate with you there. In the meantime, I hope that you have a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you again so much for joining me. And I will talk to you soon.